Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the program for this beautiful Thursday edition of the show. Wow, what a awesome day, right? I mean, it is nice. We're currently sitting at 26 degrees here on top of the world in beautiful Homer, Alaska. We hope you're enjoying similar mild weather across the state. Hey, bring on the global warming, right? I mean, this is what I'm kidding. Man, I just heard somebody scream at their radio. It's amazing. Anyway, we're ready to go here, and we are diving into it. It's just you and me and a bunch of headlines from around the state today. I probably should turn on the phones as well just to give you a chance to sound off on things, and I will probably do that here a little bit later on in the program. But I got a lot of things to talk about. Now, I told my wife last night, I said, man, I don't want to rant because it just feels like the last few weeks, especially in regards to the education thing, I have been feeling very ranty. That every time we get into a discussion on it, I just end up getting agitated. And for that, I apologize. But the frustration for me is the fact that we've seen this coming, right? We've seen this coming for so long. And just now, in fact, there was an article that I was reading right before we came on the program, and one of the comments, and this was specifically talking about the new oil tax structure, which we're going to get into here in just a few moments. But there was a quote in there from Kathy Giessel, who is the Republican senator from Anchorage, who said, let's see, she stressed the dire fiscal outlook facing legislators. And she said, quote, "It's a huge challenge we've talked about, the approaching fiscal cliff. Well, now we're standing on the edge." The problem is that they're acting like this thing just came out of nowhere. They're acting like this was we just didn't see it. But you could go back, I mean, even just the last couple of years on this program, and you can look at our discussions about the governor's fiscal outlook, his 10-year plan. I have been talking about this for years. And specifically, we brought it into deep and tight focus in just the last couple of years alone on where we were going. And now, all of a sudden, the legislature is acting like, oh, well, we didn't see that. We didn't see that cliff approaching. Look at where we're standing right now. It's unbelievable. And I think that's where a lot of my frustration and rantiness comes from. Because this was a preventable problem. And it was a problem that could have been prevented, not without pain. There's no doubt about it. There's not without pain, but with less pain than where we're at right now. If we'd coasted to a stop at the top of the fiscal cliff, it would have, we would have experienced some challenges and some ickiness and some pain, but not like if you throw the brakes on the last 25 yards ahead of the cliff. You may not even spilled your tea on that train. You would have just been slow downward pressure holding it up until we got there. But instead, we threw the brakes on and spun the wheel to reverse, and here we are. Everything comes flying off the shelves, and people are on the floor, and whatever other metaphor you want to portray in your mind of what happens when you slam the brakes on a train that's heading towards a fiscal cliff. But I think that's where my frustration lies, is that this is something that we have talked about on this program for a long time. And all of a sudden now they're like, oh, it's and I just feel like screaming,
welcome to the party, pal.
That's what it's what I feel like. I feel like, you just now seeing this, you're just, and then of course, once they see it, they come up with all the wrong answers. It's not a problem in their minds with, I think, little to no self-analysis. It's not a problem of their spending habits. It's not a problem of the state wanting to be all things to all people. This is simply a problem of revenue. We just don't have enough revenue coming in, because they're not asking themselves, should we be providing all that we're providing? That's not a self-analysis question that anybody at the state seems to be asking themselves. The majority of legislators are all like, well, we just need more revenue. Even members of the minority. I mean, Jubilee Underwood said it yesterday. Well, we just need more resource revenue. Okay. I mean, I don't disagree in principle that we need more revenue and we need more resource revenue. But the problem is, one, resource revenue doesn't happen overnight. And two, if we just give them more money, what will they do? What has been, past performance is indicative of future results. What have you done in the past? What are you going to do in the future? Well, if we give them more, this is Godwin's law for the, no, Godwin's law is the one that references Nazis. Parkinson's principle. It's Parkinson's principle where basically, all the work fills up all the available hours. And this is a subset where it's basically all of the spending basically consumes all of the available money. Where if you give them more money, they will continue to spend that money at the same rate that they did prior to that. We had an opportunity in the early teens in this state to take a hard look at what we were doing. During that time, it was coming out of the early aughts, and it was high cotton season. What was it, 2007, 2008, 2009, when oil was sky high. And, the state was $150 a barrel or something. And that was the year that was it 2007, 2008, when Palin gave out that big energy rebate, because the state was raking in money hand over fist. They were pouring money into the CBR, billions of dollars. In fact, at one point, the CBR had something like $16 billion in it at one time. And they were just pouring money into it. And, we were just doing great. And of course, as the state of Alaska is wont to do, we expanded our spending. We expanded our programs. We expanded the dependency state to match that kind of revenue generation. But again, the problem is that stuff is finite. That stuff is cyclical. And generally speaking, we don't remain at the top for very long. Now, conversely, generally speaking, we don't always remain at the bottom for very long, but we're always somewhere in the middle, vacillating between plus and minus as far as doing great or doing poorly. But instead of acting like we should be husbanding our resources and we should be, planning for the long term, We should be planning for the peaks and valleys. We should be planning for the highs and the lows. We seem to always think and act like it's always going to be high cotton season. Again, the one that really stuck out with me was the first year that Sean Parnell, as governor, produced his budget, and they factored the budget on, I think it was $105 or $115 a barrel per oil. That's what they factored their budget on. But even by the time they released from the time they start to the time they released their budget, oil had dropped from over $100 a barrel down to something like $79 or $80 a barrel. So we were already deficit spending from the very beginning. And over the course of the next, 3-4 years, we never stopped. And over the course of those years in the early teens, we went through billions of dollars in savings, spending somewhere between $16 and $18 billion out of our various savings account, mostly the CBR, which, by the way, is still owed a big chunk of money. By the Constitution, the CBR is supposed to have $10 billion in it. And we drained that thing down to I think it was less than $500 million at one point. It's back up now. It's like I think it's 1.2 or 1.3 billion in the CBR right now, but we've never repaid it. So not only were we spending our savings, technically the savings threshold at zero should have been $10 billion. That should have been like, well, we really can't go below that unless it's an absolute emergency. And yet we drained it all. So we're borrowing from the future. Once we spent that first $6 billion, $7 billion, and we hit the $10 billion mark, we were already borrowing from the future. And yet there was no slowing down. There was no analysis, by legislators as to, I wonder how we got here. I wonder what we're doing. I wonder what we should be doing to make this work. I wonder what I want to know about long-term fiscal sustainability. There was just none of those discussions came out. And it wasn't until, the Fiscal Policy Working Group got together, which, what came out of the Fiscal Policy Working Group, I thought was some pretty good stuff. But really what it was that they were just shining them on. The Fiscal Policy Working Group was created because the minority at the time stood fast and said, we're not going to vote out of the CB. We're not going to give you the full vote out of the CBR. It was threatening for a government shutdown. That's how they got this Fiscal Policy Working Group put together. And they came out with some good stuff. But there was no teeth. Once the threat was over of the shutdown and everything else, they just placated them with the Fiscal Policy Working Group and then patted them on the heads and sent them on their way. People like Ben Carpenter, who believed in that and who really, put it forward, were basically, treated like, they were treated, he's a cute little kid who wants to talk about fiscal, and then they'd never do it. There is no analysis as to how we got here. Well, let me help you with that. Let me help you with this. We got here because we have an unending appetite for spending in this state. And it's not just this batch of legislators. It's not just this legislature. It has been this way since 1969. 55 years. We got that first royalty check in late 69, early 70. It was nearly $1 billion, and the state had never seen that kind of money. The entirety of the state budget, when they received that first royalty check, was right in the neighborhood of $162 million. That was the state budget, right? That was everything. $162 million. I mean, that's barely a 10th or a 12th of just education funding now. In fact, they gave more one-time funding last year than the entirety of the state budget in that first year when we received that first royalty check. And they got that $1 billion royalty check, baby, and they went through it like a house of fire. Like you doused that thing in gasoline, naphtha, and MEK, and you lit a match. That's how fast they went through it. And quite honestly, it's never slowed down. And you can even see the legacy of that today in the discussions of things like this Medicaid cut that's potentially coming on from DOJ and the Trump administration, the federal government, and more. You could see the danger. We talked about the dangers of Medicaid expansion when it happened under Governor Walker on this program specifically. And today, those birds are about to come home to roost, and we're going to talk about this. But here's the good. Is it the good news or the bad news? The good news, the news is this was fully preventable. The bad news is that nobody wanted to take it on. Nobody wanted to pay the price. And so instead of a little pain over a period of years, we're now facing major surgery. I'm mixing my metaphors here. The medical metaphors, the train metaphors. Maybe we should operate on the train. I don't know. We got to go. We're going to be back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Good morning, my friends. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Let's see. See what you guys are got going on this morning. Anthony said the upside of global warming, think of all the money we'll save on heating oil and natural gas. And the fact that we won't burn it, right? To stay away. I mean, that's good. That's good. Terry says, talking about Kathy Giesel saying we're standing at the edge of this fiscal. The edge she created. She didn't create it alone. This has been going on for years. They're just participants. They're just, rantiness, said Kevin. Yeah, rantiness. I mean, I don't know if that's a word, but it is now. I made it. I put it in the lexicon. Kevin also said, remember the glide path to a soft landing? Yeah, well, I mean, good luck. We could have created a glide path, but we failed to do the requisite self-analysis. That's part of the problem. Anthony always painting the picture that we wish we could paint together. He said the pain could have been chopping off a pinky toe while on morphine, but now we're sawing off the leg with a tube of Oragel for the pain. That's what's going to happen because we refuse to take a look at it early on and from the beginning. All right. I'm going through here. Constitution, what is that? Says Ron. Tracer said Alaska has a long reputation as a boom and bust economy. Well, and there's a reason for that. Part of it is the nature of how we do things because it is a resource-driven economy. So there's going to be boom and bust is kind of baked into that to begin with. But we've made it worse because we have a legislature that has no forward vision and can't see beyond the next boom. In fact, they're stuck in boom mode. And it only becomes a crisis when things are in the bust mode and then they don't know how to deal with it. Chris says Alaska voters are really the ones to blame. There is a truth to that, for certain. Rob Myers says, if our budget from 1968 had followed inflation and population growth, it would be $2.2 billion in UGF spend. So roughly about half of where we're at right now. Yeah. I'm just scrolling through some of the comments. Let's see. Bradley says, I think the problem is a deeper societal problem with the way that most Americans have maxed out credit and only pay the minimum payment. We have a problem with immediate gratification. I mean, I would agree with that we have bought into this idea that somehow there will always be more, that there are no consequences to our actions. I mean, coming out of the Great Depression, we had people who had a real, true, visceral understanding of what doing things financially wrong could entail. And we're not, we're just not there anymore. We seem to have forgotten all that. I think there must be some serious sarcasm font going on here. Some poor Alaskans desperately need Medicaid to survive, said Tracer. Well, maybe some do. The problem is when you have 1/3 of your state on a dependency program like that, that's a sure sign that we've got something going wrong right there. All right. And Brian quotes the classic, please God, let there be one more boom. I promise I won't piss this one away. That has been the battle cry, the hue and battle cry of the everybody in this state for years, decades. 100%. All right, let's get to it. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's do this thing.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yep, that's me. I am the walrus. Cuckoo, cuckoo. All right. So let's. I guess we need to break this down. I guess we need to break this down and talk about it. Somebody just pointed me to Rob Myers' new piece in the Alaska Watchman, which I'm going to have to take a look at during the next break, and we probably come back to it because Rob has always got some thoughtful points to make. He did make a point actually in the chat room. Rob is actually in the chat room here this morning monitoring the show. And he did mention that, when I was talking about that 68, 69, 70, that $160 million or so in state budget when we got our first big royalty check from the oil companies, he made the point to say that if our budget from 1968 had followed inflation and population growth, we would be looking at about $2.2 billion in UGF spending, which is roughly about half of what we're spending right now. So we obviously have grown the size and scope of government well beyond what I think many of us would consider to be sustainable levels. All right, so let's talk about some of the stories that are going on around the state and how this is going to affect us. Of course, we've ad nauseum, we've gone over the whole education funding boost and how literally this is if you're looking for a true path to sustainability, this is the opposite path going in the other direction. We're talking about, $644 million per year just in the first 3 years. And then it goes up about $50 to $60 million every year thereafter. because it's pegged to inflation. And that's where it goes from there. And yet we have no way to pay for it, and no real, they're by not saying anything, they're saying something big. By not giving you another option as to how they're going to pay for it, they basically are saying quietly out loud that they're just going to take the PFD to pay for it, and then we'll figure the rest of it out later, which is great. I mean, in quotes, air quotes, which is great until you figure out that within just a handful of years that the entirety of the PFD is consumed at that point, and then it still goes up in the future. It still continues to ratchet up. So how do you pay for that? And of course, that's not a conversation that many people are willing to have. And so now they have proposed a new PFD formula. They are proposing, and this is really, well, I mean, I would say it's much ado about nothing, because they've already been following this 75-25 split. Members of the Senate have supported that 75-25 split since the first year that Bill Walker basically vetoed the permanent fund. And they've been setting it by fiat pretty much over the whole time. That's always been kind of their yardstick, was the 75-25 split. But now they've brought this out and brought it forward. Interestingly enough, I thought it was interesting that even members of the Senate majority didn't know about this bill before it came out of the Finance Committee. He didn't. Lyman Hoffman is quoted in this article from James Brooks over at the Alaska Beacon, saying that that he didn't inform all the members of the Senate Majority Caucus before introducing it, but that he had support from all 7 members of the committee, including 2 members who were part of the minority. They all came out and sponsored it and co-sponsored it. Members of the Senate minority that I talked to said that they didn't know that this was coming. And so it's a little disappointing to see. Now, again, I have said many times that if you don't like the formula, then change it. So this is their attempt to go ahead and change it. But again, at this point, to quote a famous politician, what difference does it make? Because they've already decided. I mean, they don't have to follow the statutes anyway. So this is just another statute that they can ignore at their whim, although it would take away some of the language that they say runs contrary to the POMV statute. So at least I guess they wouldn't be in conflict for now. But, again, this is just more of that self-same. This is a bigger example of kind of that self-same lack of self-analysis. To say, what have we done to get us here? Any business or any household budget, I guess, by, anything outside of government, any budgetary process outside of actual government would look at where they're at and go, how did we get here? What happened? And what did we do? And what do we need to, what brought us to this position? They would look at that and go, okay, we can see that this was a problem and that was a problem, and we need to start reversing it. But in the state and in government in general, I mean, the federal government is a prime example of this. And again, this is what I've said for years, that it's monkey see, monkey do at the federal level. The state legislators are all jealous of the amount of epic freedom that the national legislature has in just passing whatever budget they feel like, and they'll find the money somewhere. But this is, I mean, again, trying to be all things to all people and just passing a budget no matter what. There is no reflection on what's causing this. It's always a revenue problem, never a spending problem. And now that's going to be exacerbated by many other factors. I want to talk here in just a few minutes about the potential for federal employees and the fact that we could have a bunch of federal employees, be fired and where they're going for there. But before we get to that, let's talk for a minute here about the latest boogeyman in the room, and that is the proposed Medicaid cuts. Now, there's two different components of this problem right now. One is the fact that there is a lawsuit that 17 states, including Alaska, have joined to join together to sue the federal government over regulations that were enacted by the Biden administration last year that gave an update to the disability discrimination law that's kind of baked into and works hand in glove with Medicaid. And so that is the first part of it. The second part of it is the new budget resolution that was just passed in the Congress that was supported by Nick Begich and more. It was a tight budget resolution. It was 217 to 215 votes. And it's going to cut a significant amount of money out of the Medicaid program. $880 billion were the cuts that they were looking for on the congressional side. And according to some of the folks in the legislature who've been talking about this could translate to a loss of about $1 billion in federal funding for Alaska's Medicaid program. Now, Alaska's Medicaid program, because it was expanded in the mid-teens, 2016, 2017, in the final years of the Walker administration, Medicaid spending in the state just absolutely skyrocketed. In fact, Alaska's Medicaid budget is about $2.6 billion. $2.6 billion, and it covers roughly 1/3, 30%, 270,000 Alaskans out of the 740 or 50,000 people that are here in the state. 270,000 Alaskans are participating at one level or another with Medicaid. Which, just think about that for a minute. Just tell me that that's not like one of the biggest red flags that you could have. And that number has remained fairly consistent over the last 8-9 years. Right at the end of the Walker administration, it was 274,000 Alaskans were participating in the Medicaid program at one level or another. I mean, that should have been a red flag right from the beginning. Because the expansion and the how large the program became and the number of people that it started to glom onto, I mean, it's all well and good for the first couple of years, right? But the problem is, what happens when the federal government stops paying for it? And we talked about this at the time, that there are many programs that have been started in the past, many programs that the state decided to participate in, or programs they decided to create themselves, that were nearly fully funded at the very beginning by federal dollars. And they would tell people, oh, it's free money. Oh, don't worry, we're not going to have to pay for this. This is good. And then some of us would go, well, yeah, that's good for this year, but what about 5 years from now? Or 10 years from now, when the money, oh, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. And yet, what's happening today? What is the caterwauling today? We're going to get into that here in just a second. We'll continue the Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We're going to open up the phone lines in hour 2 to get your thoughts on this and other things. Meanwhile, we're going to talk about this Medicaid and the two different components, the lawsuit and the cuts, and we'll see where we go from here. Back with more in just a minute. on your home for Common Sense Radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Let me go over here. And on this down here. Bring that over there. And I'm going to do over this right here. Let me put that right there. Don't mind me. I'm just over here banging the drum on stuff. Okay. Let me go back. Randy is asking a question. It's always interesting when Randy asks a question. So he says, Michael Dukes, if the entirety of the PFD went away, would you then be in favor of a secondary 1980 style PFD in order to preserve the PFD concept? Well, the question then becomes, Randy, how, even if I was in favor of a secondary PFD, a 1980 style, which, by the way, I don't believe would pass legal muster because that was the whole Sobel decision and all that. I don't think you could have a PFD, secondary PFD style. But even if it could, how do you pay for it? If the entirety of the PFD went away, how would you pay for your secondary PFD? Because now they would have consumed all the money, which is the flaw in your logic, where you continue to go on about, well, a true dividend should only be if we have surplus. And but the problem is, if they're spending every available dime, you'll never have a surplus. Again, that's like trying to give a shopaholic a credit card and say, here's your credit card, control yourself now. And they just keep spending and spending and spending. I mean, that's always been part of the problem. And I know Rob said it was less than half. We're closer to 6 billion. I was trying to be conservative when I said it's, for some reason, said Ron, Rob isn't showing up in my chat. That's because you could see on where it says your name, you see the little Facebook icon. And then you see under Rob's, you see the little YouTube icon. That's why you can't see him, because he's on YouTube and you're on Facebook. I could see everybody, because I have unlimited godlike powers. All right. Let me see. Yeah, told Walker not to do that. Nobody listens. Costs the state millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, exactly. Rob says, as a portion of the whole country, we have about 72 million on Medicaid out of a population of 340 million. So about a quarter, about just under a quarter of people. Anthony said, a third of the state being on Medicaid implies two things. One, the criteria to qualify is too loose and is allowing for abuse, or the average Alaskan simply can't afford health care due to their pockets being previously emptied by the government for other things. Remember that whole doom loop economy? Might be an indicator we're already on track. I mean, this is what we're talking about here. Let's see. At the end of the day, dedicated funding prohibition is a problem. Time to remove it, said David. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get caught up here. Leela says, I used to work in the Alaskan social work field, and among those in Chase medical and disability benefits, and among those, I don't know what that word is, Layla. I'm sorry, your auto correct boogered it up. Medicaid and disability. Alaska 15-year agenda is considered the best state in terms of coverage. Then they expanded it in the mid-2010s, so it's even more attractive and expensive. And the problem is that Medicaid regs require states to continue to cover at pretty much the same level even after the federal funding is withdrawn. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah, people being told by their doctor that they should be on a pill that costs $700 a month doesn't help either. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. That's it, And Ron says the government doesn't have a revenue problem. Their problem is getting the money out of your account without us knowing about it. Well, they're trying to hide the taxation. That's going to be the next big thing we're going to talk about here is the taxation that's coming. Not surprising. Not surprising at all that that's coming right now. Okay, getting ready to jump back into this here. Please like and share, like and follow. There's about 70 of you watching on the various channels, and only 12 people have liked it. Only 12 of you. What the heck, man? I feel like you don't like me, man. I feel like you don't. So like and share. Will you? You can share it from whatever platform you're watching on. YouTube, Rumble, Facebook. But all of you can like it with a thumbs up. Let's get to it. 10 seconds now. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio, The Michael Duke Show. Let's do this thing right now. Okay, let's get to this. So we're talking about the Medicaid expansion, and we're talking about the two different components right now that are being factored in. I guess we'll get this one out of the way first. So ADN and Sean McGuire write about this lawsuit that's going on right now. 17 states, including Alaska, have filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court in northern Texas, challenging the regulations that were made by the Biden administration last year about Medicaid. And it's an update to the disability discrimination law. The regulations amended Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act that was signed into law by Nixon back in 1973, which prohibits recipients of federal funding from discriminating against people with disabilities. What happened was the Biden administration regulation change stated that gender dysphoria could be considered a disability for discrimination protections. That's what the lawsuit contends. That by including gender dysphoria in there, you were putting millions of federal dollars at risk if the states did not basically toe the line on this. But according to Treg Taylor, the Attorney General of the state, that was not the reason that the state of Alaska joined the lawsuit. The State Department of Law in September said that the administration's new regulations would impose unfunded mandates on the state, particularly in Medicaid services to Alaska. Taylor said the state risked losing federal funding if it failed to comply with the law, and he said substantial costs could be borne by the state. This was part of the problem with the whole Medicaid expansion thing to begin with, because you have to realize that once you start down that road, with the Medicaid expansion and things like that, you are committing yourself to continuing down the road, whether the federal government funded it or not. That is part of the problem. The article goes on to talk about how there's lots of disability advocates who are just, they're so outraged that that this could be going on, and that that there's. And again, while I understand that individuals will be harmed, there will always be individuals who will be harmed by cuts to government programs in one way or another. There's always somebody. who's going to feel the pinch on that. But I think Taylor basically lines it out when he says it is not fiscally feasible for its system of care to provide all the services across the state in the final rule's definition of the most integrated setting in every instance, which has to do with whether or not, when they say integrated system, people who have disabilities need to have that most integrated setting. That's an actual phrase, meaning they have to be put in places where disabled people can interact with other people as much as possible. Basically, what Trigg Taylor is saying is that we don't have the money. We don't have the money to do this. And this was all before this whole thing and this lawsuit. This has all been working and percolating back in the wings before we got to this new vote from the Congress just Tuesday that would put a tremendous cut on Medicaid, $880 billion in cuts to the Medicaid program across the country. And lawmakers are already upset. Could cost $1 billion in federal funding. But again, they're not even saying that they're. Kathy Giesel got up and spoke in front of the legislature. And I mean, she even mentions the biggest problem here. Part of the biggest problem, again, is the number of Alaskans who are on Medicaid. This is on Gavel to Gavel. This is what she said.
For Alaska, Medicaid makes up over $1 billion annually of our budget, Mr. President. 1/3 of Alaskans receive Medicaid benefits, including our seniors who are often dual beneficiaries. That means they get Medicaid and Medicare benefits to assist with their health care.
I mean, it's $1 billion. We spend $700 million in state funds. The overall portion is $2 point something billion with the federal monies for 270,000 people, roughly. And what's happening now is what we warned about when Governor Walker put those expansions in place. The article quotes Genevieve Mina, who's the Democrat from Anchorage. She said, it's not an exaggeration to say that these cuts would cut a lot of people and push them into medical bankruptcy. It will destroy our own state budget, and it will cause a collapse in our healthcare system. Now, I don't know if it'll collapse the healthcare system, but it could destroy the state budget. If you're currently spending, and the article quotes, was it 2.2? I think it was the other article. It's quoting $2.2 billion. No, I'm sorry. Andy Josephson said Alaska's Medicaid budget is roughly $2.6 billion, of which $700 million comes from the state. And the rest comes from the federal government. So if they cut $1 billion out of the federal funding, which is what this article is reporting, that means the $700 million less 2.6 means that the federal government's currently spending $1.9 billion. We would have to come up with that additional. Now we would be spending $1.7 billion on Medicaid. And this is what we warned about. We warned the fact that if you expanded Medicaid, and you're talking about how this is all free federal money. We all need this right now. This is good. The feds are going to pay, but they're never going to pay for it forever. They were never going to pay for it at the same level that they did at the beginning. I challenged at the time when we were talking about this, I challenged people, find me a single program that was started in the state that was initially funded by the federal government that to this day was still funded at that level or more. And the problem with the Medicaid expansion is that you were mandated, once you created the constituency, unless there was some really broad overarching problems, like maybe they had a whole classification thing that could be changed, and maybe that can still help these days. But for the most part, you were on the hook for it. So right now, basing the spending on what we did last year, which included $170 million one-time funding for education and everything else. We are with the same size PFD that we had last year and $170 million in one-time funding for the school. We are $540 million underwater. Where do we find the extra $1 billion to pay for Medicaid? For one-third of our deals. Now, in my mind, the best case scenario is that we would be able to trim a significant portion of people off the books, because then we wouldn't be on the hook for it. Yeah, it's bad. It puts some people in a tough position, but I will tell you right now, there are people out there who have been doing very well with the marketplace and other things. They've had, got an advocate, and you can find healthcare insurance out there. You can find it, but it requires some work and some effort and some other things. And most people just be like, just give me that free stuff. Andy Josephson is quoted saying that he believes that cuts, if they go forward as laid out in the budget resolution, would ultimately reduce the federal Medicaid spending in Alaska by $1.15 billion, causing at least 60,000 Alaskans to lose coverage. Okay. If they lose their coverage, that is a tragedy for many of these people. It's very difficult. I'm not saying that there's not a human face on this whole thing, but can we afford to do it? Can we afford to be all things to all people? The answer is no. And anyway, this goes on and on and on. And again, this is just all part and parcel of me going back to what I've been talking about this whole hour, which is the lack of self-analysis, the lack of looking back and seeing, how did we get to this spot? The analysis of, do we have a revenue problem in this state, or do we have a spending problem? And again, my argument is we've had a spending problem for decades. Now it has become both a spending and a revenue problem. But it'll never stop, unless we get a handle on the spending component of it. All right, hour 2 is dead ahead. I'm going to open up the phone lines and we'll get started from there. We'll return The Michael Duke Show. If you got to go to work, be kind, love one another, live well. We'll be back. All right, hold on a second. I'm trying to launch the phones. Okay, when I launch the phones, it always maxes out the volume on the system and screws things up for the podcast. So I wanted to have a moment of silence there. While we did that. Miracle Max. He says, it would kill people, you fool. No more tax cuts. Would kill people. Are you fine with that? No, I'm not fine with people dying. But again, you can't be all things to all people. Max, how do you propose you pay for that? Just curious. I mean, if everything was free, a lot more people would be alive, right? A lot more people would be healthier. A lot more people would be, if everything was free, that would be great, but it's not. So how do you pay for it? That's the question. No more welfare for the rich. The rich already pay a significant portion. In fact, they're like 27 to 30% of all that. They're already doing all that. They're already doing that. Medicine is open, I think, at this point. Boom, there we go. Medicine is not affordable. The tube of cream for my son is sold for $3,000. That's part and parcel of it. Don says my arthritis medication is $7,000 a month. Oh man. David Gray says tax the rich. Well, they're already being taxed. How much more? I mean, I'm not rich. I'm being taxed. You're being taxed unless you're in the lower 50 percentile, in which case you're not being taxed. You're probably actually getting money back. But I mean, it's anyway, what are you going to do? It's always a spending problem, says Melody. Do not live beyond your means. I mean, that's words that we can live by, for sure. But nobody, it just seems like we need to do all these things. Doesn't matter how much it costs. Well, how do we pay for it? Nobody knows. Let's see. Too bad. Let's see. I'm scrolling backwards here. But the collective good, something. Yeah. Walker was hell-bent on increasing Medicaid expansion. I think because that was one of the primary goals and talking points of the Democrats at the time, and that's how they got Byron Malott. That's how they got that unity ticket that they put together. He had to give up some of the things, and that was one of the things that he had to kowtow on. I'm still scrolling backwards here. See what else is going on. Right. Okay. I think I'm scrolling. I think I got all caught up. Providence and Alaska's regional will be doing major support service layoffs, and the professional ranks will be closing their doors and headed out of Alaska. I mean, there will be an effect there. Of course, there'll be a trickle-down effect. I've said that. Anytime you make a cut or do anything like that, you're going to have, there's going to be a trickle-down effect on any of that. How about taxing everyone equally and getting rid of all the deductions, said Bradley. I mean, again, when you have the bottom 50% are not paying any income taxes and the top are paying 30, between, depending on where they're at, 27 to 37%. Okay. I mean, maybe a flat tax, that Stephen Forbes talked about all those years ago, maybe that does make a lot more sense. David is like, no, they are not taxed at the same rate as average folks. I just told you how to pay for it. Very simple. Okay. I mean, I'm glad to see that you have no idea how economics work as far as, what people do with their money and malinvestment and everything else, but that's okay. I mean, you do you, boo. Where do people actually get the notion that the rich are not paying taxes, says Tyler? Well, mainstream media, that's a big talking point. That's for sure. Let me see what else. I fully expect to see an amendment from the Senate Republicans for a constitutional vote on Hoffman 75-25. Make everyone put a vote on the demise, then the people have the last say on the PFD. Yeah, I mean, that might be That might be a good way to do it. All right, we got to go. I'm doom scrolling. Yeah, for sure. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio, Hour 2 is right now.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello and good morning to you. Welcome to Hour 2 of the Big Radio Show. We are continuing on. I have now opened up the phone lines. If you would like to sound off, we'd love to hear what you have to say. 319-527-3864. 319-527-3864. We've got a folks in the chat room are just saying, well, just tax the rich. That'll make it easy. Just tax the rich are not being taxed right now. That we could, what was the stat that came out last year that if you taxed, I can't remember, I don't want to quote it, but the paraphrase of it was essentially, if they paid all the taxes, there still wouldn't be enough money. If they paid all their income, there still wouldn't be enough money to deal with all that. I mean, it's just crazy. But I mean, if you disagree with me, if you think that, nope, we need to pay for all this Medicaid, we need to pay for all this, that whatever it is, we need to pay for it, tell me why. I mean, at what point how is this fixed? Now, Anthony in the chat room makes a valid point. He says, so the ugly truth, we've been talking about Medicaid, right? Government-sponsored healthcare, the whole deal. The ugly truth is you can't solve the problem with health insurance and Medicaid without reforming the health-for-profit model American healthcare as a standard operates under. There is zero incentive for the healthcare system to actually fix you, just to keep you alive and broken enough to extract money from you ad infinitum. There is something to that. I mean, there's this. Look, there is a lot of crony capitalism going on between the pharmaceutical companies, the medical industry, the FDA, the government. There's a big problem. We've got these silos where you can't sell health insurance across state borders and a lot of these other things. There's a ton of problems that could go a long way to fixing a lot of it. Quite honestly, I think that's why RFK had such a following prior to his joining the Trump team. I think that there was a lot of people out there who were seeing a lot of these things, and he was talking a lot about this, how there was a lot of, backroom deals to keep us unhealthy, to help, kind of milk the money out of us. And I think that there is a problem there. This is not just a problem of just government spending. This is not just a problem of government dependency, people being dependent on the government instead of self-reliant. This is a problem with it. This is of infinite complexity. Like I said, from the crony capitalism to the backdoor deals to the revolving doors of some of these industries. People going to work, working at the FDA, then going to work at pharma or in the medical industry, and then revolving back into the FDA. And, we've seen this for years. So this is not just a single solution kind of problem. But the bottom line is this: we as a people cannot afford to pay for government that is all things to all people. That's really the bottom line. It would consume every available dollar and then some. And again, the worst part was this is exactly what I predicted in 2017 would happen. Is that we would get this expansion, a bunch of people would go on the rolls, they would create a constituency, and then the federal government would yoink the rug out from underneath of us and say, okay, now you're on the hook for it. It's unsustainable. It's unsustainable in the long run. That's the biggest problem. I was glancing through this article from Rob Myers over at the Alaska Watchman, and it is an excellent article that talks about the problem in Alaska, with the fact that, we keep hearing the fact that, in fact, he says in here, where is it? He keeps saying that, we keep hearing that we've got, two Republicans for every Democrat, and therefore we're a red state. And he disabuses you of that, of that notion. And he goes through it. This is an excellent piece, Rob. And I wish we could get you on. I guess maybe we'll try and get you on next week to talk about this, because this is an excellent issue, an excellent analysis, rather, of the issue. And I think this is brilliant, and it explains a lot of the problems. Why are we having a lot of the problems that we're having? Why are we having this issue of Alaska becoming this dependency state? And this is a problem that we've had in Alaska for decades, where people are more and more dependent. We like to envision ourselves as rugged individualists, right? Oh, we're so live free, live free or die. That's who we are. We like to think of ourselves in the state of Alaska kind of that way, but we are more dependent on government spending than almost any other state in the nation. Look at the hullabaloo that's coming up right now. There's an article from Corrine Smith over at the Alaska Beacon talking about, from a week ago or so, talking about the fact that 1,400 Alaska federal employees could be fired because they're probationary employees. And what is that going to do to the economy? And what is that going to do to, what are we going to, how are we going to, and again, it doesn't matter if this goes back to what we're seeing right now on the whole argument against Doge. Well, we know that there's government abuse and fraud and everything else, but this is not the right way to do it. Well, what is the right way? We could have done it with a scalpel years ago. We could have done it a little bit at a time, but it never happens. And so now we have to take the axe to it instead of the scalpel. That's what's happened. We've had every opportunity to do these things, and we haven't taken those opportunities. And this goes back to the whole slow roll in Washington and the impetus and everything else. That's why things are going so fast and furious in the White House and from the Trump administration right now, because they've got a finite amount of time to do this before the midterms, before anything else happens, and they've got to get it done before essentially there's enough pushback. I mean, in battle, momentum is everything, right? So you've got to keep the momentum going. The second the momentum stops, that's when you have bigger issues. But again, here we're going to see there's going to be an effect, folks. There is no way that you're going to cut federal funding, that you're going to cut state funding, that you're going to cut any of there's no way that you're going to make these cuts and that there's going to be no pain felt anywhere. That's unrealistic. In fact, I had to chuckle because one of the headlines, where was it? Was it the ADN? Yeah. One of the headlines from the it was a repost of a story from the Los Angeles Times, and the headline reads, "They voted for Trump, but now they're losing their U.S. government jobs." You voted for him, and now your comeuppance payback is a big. I mean, really? Yes, everybody's going to feel the pain in one way or another. Somebody is going to, but here's the bottom line. Here is the bottom line. We can't afford to continue to do what we've been doing, because what we get is what you'll always got, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Just like we can't try this slow roll method we know that there's waste and fraud and abuse, but we need to take it slow. Well, you've had the opportunity for decades to do something and you've done nothing. And we know that bureaucracy, they love the slow roll because they'll just outlive any administration or any short-term or politicians or appointed people. The entrenched bureaucracy, they love that slow roll because nothing ever changes. Yeah, I mean, it's not like we live in a bureaucratocracy at this point. At many levels, in the state level, in the national level, we're living where basically and part of this is because Congress has abdicated their responsibility in writing laws. They used to write laws that had all the details in it, and over the years they've just slowly pass a framework and they give it to some governmental bureaucracy to say, you guys fill in the blanks. And that's where we're at right now. We cannot continue at the same level. You cannot continue to borrow billions and trillions of dollars. And at the national level, it's trillions of dollars. At the state level, it's billions of dollars. We've been taking money out of our constitutional budget reserve and everything else over the years and basically borrowing it from future generations. You can't continue to do that and expect that it's all going to work out. There's this little thing called arithmetic. I mean, that's the thing. There's the thing. You can't work into the negative forever and expect it's all going to be okay. It's like trying to divide by zero, right? I mean, it's just, you can't do it. But that's what all of our politicians do. Left and right are doing the same thing. We got a call. I guess we'll go over here to the phone call here to see what they have to say. Let's go over here. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's John Galt. I'm in the Fairbanks area.
Hello, John. What's on your mind?
Well, the University of Alaska on President's Day, on Channel 9 in the Fairbanks area, 360, they had just one word across the screen for over 12 hours there: violence. That's what the University of Alaska is calling for. They're calling for violence.
You mean actually?
Now, why in the world?
You mean actually on the TV screen, the word violence was on the screen?
Yes, and large black letters all the way across the screen. No other programming, just the word violence. Now, why is the state of Alaska supporting the University of Alaska when they're calling for violence? Doesn't that make the state a party to violence? Anyway,
it's a good question.
I'll let you think.
Well, thank you, John. I didn't know about that. And that's the university. Channel 9 is KUAC, which is a national public radio. It's a national public broadcasters funded station. If they just had a simple screen that just said violence for 5 or 6 or 12 or however many hours you're saying, I have questions. Why? What were they trying to say? on President's Day? Were they saying?
Yeah, that's my question. Maybe I was going to contact Rob Myers. He's my senator there, so maybe I'll follow through with that. But that university, it's a land grant college. It needs to support itself. They've got a mine, the Silver Fox mine, where they mine antimony and to a lesser extent silver, what have you. But they could be funding themselves, especially for, I listened to a lot of people call in begging the government, begging the state for this new agriculture program, a new government entity. So anyway, I think the university, it's time for those folks to grow up and start supporting themselves. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for your call. I appreciate it. I hadn't heard about this. I would have assumed that if this, I would have assumed if they had the word violence across the screen for umpteen hours, I would assume that would have been picked up somewhere. But this is the first time hearing about it. I mean, I would, if it did happen, I have questions. I have questions about it for sure. What? I mean, I think we should all have questions if that's what actually happened out there. All right, we're coming up on the break. We got to go. Don't go anywhere. We will continue the Michael Duke Show. Chris in the chat room says, I think his TV was hacked. I didn't see that on PBS. Maybe. But again, I think if something like that had happened, maybe that probably would have made national news, I would have thought. But who knows? It is Alaska. All right, we got to continue in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes on Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
I'm sorry. David is, you don't know what violence means? Well, of course I know what violence means. Does it mean something different to you? I mean, I'm just, what battle are we in, says David? The battle against the poor people? No, the battle for the very soul of our country, financially. The financial battle is what I'm talking about. That's what I'm actually talking about. Of course, the height of his argument is, are you related to David Dukes? Boy, I've never heard that before. Ever. Really? I've never heard that before. That's the height of his argument at this point. Now Michael's feeding the troll. I mean, I love it. I think it's great. Give me the counterpoint. How quickly everyone forgets that Clinton got rid of over 377 federal workers to get us back, get the budget back then. I'm a federal worker, and you must always be prepared for anything, which is why the fact that prepping is always important. Yeah. No, I got you. Leila said, I Googled it and couldn't find a report of such a chyron, but there were national protests of Trump's policies on President's Day, some of them resulting in minor violence, which no violence is minor if you're a victim of it. Yeah, no, I mean, again, this was on President's Day, he said. So again, I don't know. I can't see Channel 9 from here, but I would think that if that's what was happening, you would think that would again be national news. How about all the federal workers, said Jennifer's, that were dismissed for not taking the jab? I know they weren't upset about that, but they're upset now that other people could lose their job. It's interesting. It's interesting to watch, to say the least. Yeah, to go back to, I want to go back now here. I just read it, but I want to go back to it because I just thought about something. Miguel saying how quickly everyone forgets that Clinton got rid of 377,000 workers. And they also forget, like on the deportation side, they forget that Barack Obama deported more people than any other president in U.S. history at the time. But that was okay because, again, it was their guy doing it. See, this is where we get into the politics of polarization and us versus them, and this there's no good ideas except for our side's ideas. This is why I don't belong to a side. This is why I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, because a lot of times they're both idiots. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, this problem that we have right now, this fiscal problem in the country and here in the state of Alaska, it's both. It's not a Republican or a Democratic problem. It is a politician problem. But I am entertained by the people who are like, oh, that's outrageous. I can't believe that Trump was doing that. And yet you can go back and find other presidents who did exactly the same thing that they were all okay with at the time. That's the interesting thing. This is not, again, a left versus right problem. This is not a Democrat versus Republican problem. This is a politician problem. This is a bureaucracy problem. This is a, kind of the big government spend versus kind of more rugged individualist problem. Because, again, there are people out there who believe that the only way we can move forward is with a direct benevolent intervention of government. And there are those of us here that also feel like the government needs to get out of the way and allow us to live our lives and do the things that we need to do. And they should not be all things to all people. That's the thing. Tyler said, I'm just glad I came to the realization years ago that the Trumps, the Bidens, the Obamas, and the Ellens of the world don't really care about me. I can enjoy watching people slobber the knobs of these clowns and laugh. I mean, exactly. It's one of the reasons why, generally speaking, I don't cover national politics, because what difference does it? We can't necessarily affect those things. What we can affect is what's going on right here.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, continuing on. Phone lines are open at 319-527-3864. I was just saying in the chat room that, look, this is, again, not a Democrat or a Republican problem, not a left versus right problem. This is a big government versus more rugged individualism problem in my mind. And I said, that's why I don't belong to either team. And then Frank says, and libertarians are never idiots? Huh? Are you kidding me? Libertarians could be some of the biggest idiots out there. I mean, I've been a libertarian my entire life, and I've seen some libertarians where I'm going, oh, God, man, get the boot off your head. Really? I mean, you're not helping. Let me take a chewable gummy, marijuana gummy before I get up on a national stage and talk about being president. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? We can all be idiots from time to time. What I get tired of is people going, well, my guy is the savior and he will fix everything. He's the solution. And your guy is the devil. And it doesn't matter which side you're on, because it's always the other side you're talking about, right? This is a politician problem, folks. That's what this is. This is not a you versus me and us versus them, a left versus right. This is a political elites versus the rest of the world. And they always want to give you what you want because that's how they retain power. That's what it is. And what you're getting right now is exactly what you voted for. It's what I voted for. I voted for Trump. I held my nose and voted for Trump, hoping that maybe he would do some of the things that he's talking about. And I've been pleasantly surprised that he's doing what he said he was going to do, try and reduce the size and scope of government, make things more efficient, do those kind of things. That's a good thing. You can't be surprised well, maybe you can be, because politicians always say stuff and then never deliver. But you shouldn't be surprised when you get what you actually, what he actually said he was going to bring. All right, let's go back over to the phones. I see Randy is on the phone from Fairbanks. Let's see what Randy has to say. Good morning. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Michael. I just wanted to answer that question that you had posed to me, because in response to a chat that I wrote in the first hour there, how I was talking about always advocating this secondary PFD idea, the Hammond bond, I call it. But you were asking a good question. You said, well, how can we afford a secondary PFD if we can't supposedly even afford the current PFD that we have right now? And my answer simply is that my idea, the Hammond bond, is so much cheaper to the state. It would only be 1% of the current cost of the current PFD program. The current, you could say, is like $1 billion a year. Of course, it varies, but call it $1 billion per year. My idea is only $10 million per year. And the reason I come up with that is because if you had 200,000 people, adults only, because the original 1980 PFD program was only for adults, not for anyone less than 18 years old. And if you had 200,000 people signed up for this that had bought a Hammond bond, that I call it, and it paid the next following year only $50, $50 times 200,000 people is only $10 million, and $10 million is only 1% of $1 billion. However, I must admit that every year, the next year, if they bought another Hammond bond, they'd get $100. And so instead of $10 million, it would go up to $20 million. It would slowly climb. And after like 20 years, when people have accumulated all these bonds over a period of 20 years, each year's payout would be $1,000. And so that would be $200 million rather, that it would cost. But even that is only 1/5 of $1 billion.
Right.
So
but here's my question. Here's my question, Randy. Because the fact that the state is right now, based on current spending, just on current spending, $554 million in the hole for next year, next fiscal year, based on just status quo spending. We do exactly the same spending we're doing now. We do the same $170 million one-time funding. We do all, we pay the 14, whatever. Just based on it now, we are $500 million in the hole now. Do you not think that even the $10 million would not be a juicy target? Because, you've advocated that we should just let them do what they're going to do with the monies, and they'll eventually learn some fiscal discipline. That's essentially what you said here. I don't know, it was 10 years ago or something. You said something along those lines, that we shouldn't take the money out of their hands, because I said starve the beast. We should take the money out of their hands, because that way they'd be forced to have some fiscal discipline. And you're like, no, they need the money because it should just be a leftover. It should be whatever the surplus is. But there's never any surplus, Randy. That's the problem. So if you don't think that your $10 million nest egg of this new Hammond bond would not be, look, hey, there's $10 million we could take right now because it's statutory and it's not constitutional, we could take that. Do you think that it would not be just sucked right up along with every other available nickel in the state?
Well, when I said 10 million, that's $10 million from the state to us, to you and me, if we bought a Hammond bond. So
you're missing my point.
Starting to beat by 10 million.
You're missing my point. It's money that is state money, right?
Uh-huh.
So, but there's nothing stopping them from taking it and spending it on something else, right?
You mean spending it on a Hammond bond? What
No.
million are you talking about?
You're talking about a state-funded program, right? A state-funded program where we buy a bond and they pay us back. They pay $50 on a bond or whatever, right? This is what you're saying right now. Mm-hmm. What's to stop them from taking the funding for that program and spending it on something else?
Well, they're obligated to pay the owner of the bond $50 per year.
They're obligated to pay people at PFD. That hasn't stopped them. The courts have said that they have the power of appropriation. Unless it's in the Constitution, they can decide not to pay it, Randy.
Well, the trick of the Hammond bond is that it has the contract written right on the certificate, and you can see a picture of that certificate and the contract if you go to my website, pfdbudget.com, and it's a quid pro quo contract. It even says so right on the contract.
Okay. All right. Well,
They have to pay.
Well, they have to pay. Okay. Well, again, the courts have already decided that they don't have to pay unless it's constitutionally mandated. They have the power of appropriation and can decide to pay or not. That's my whole point, Randy. These people are never going to gain fiscal discipline on their own. That's the problem. They will see every available dollar and they will suck it up. Just like they've pulled dollars out of other programs that I'm sure had plenty of contracts attached to them. They pulled other monies out of different programs and paid for things out of different pockets and buckets of money and done all this other stuff. There's nothing stopping them from spending every available dollar. That is the problem.
Well, when you say the courts have already decided about regarding the current PFD program, that's because the current PFD program is not a quid pro quo contract.
It's not just the PFD program.
Does have to pay a state worker.
Because again, they have to pay a state worker because a state worker is covered under a contract that is enshrined in the Constitution. That's the difference, Randy. Because state compensation and retirement plans, those are covered by constitutional provisions. Once you enter into a contract with the state as an employee, then that's under the Constitution. Everything else, see, the court decision was not simply about the PFD. That was the subject of the case, but the ramifications of the precedent go far beyond that. It essentially said that the legislature is the appropriating body and they can decide whether or not to see those, to pay those things. Because it's totally up to them. They can basically ignore the law. If it's in statute and not constitutional, they can ignore it. That was the farther reaching ramifications of that. And again, here's my big question to you, Randy, and this will be the final question. I'll let you go. Do you think that they're going to find fiscal discipline if we just continue to allow them to have all those monies and do whatever they want with them? Or would it be better to pull some of that money off the table and put it into the hands of private citizens?
Well, I think it's better if we enact a Hammond bond, which is a quid pro quo contract, which will yank that money. And if they try to break this contract, we'll go to court, small claims court.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I think your naivete is showing in some of this stuff, but you know what? Good for you for coming up with a solution. And people can go out and take a look at your stuff out there on the internet and take a look at the Hammond bond if you want to see what that's all about and take a look at it. I mean, I don't think it'll make first of all, I don't know. I don't think it'll pass the smell test as far. Well, maybe it will because you have to purchase it. I don't know. You know what? I still don't think it matters because again, they will suck up every available dollar to them and then some. We've seen that time and time and time again. Again, 10-year forecasts for the state right now. Multi-million-dollar deficits every year moving forward. And a lot of those assumptions, by the way, based on very, very rosy projections about what our spending is going to be. Very rosy, very rosy. Sourdough Steel over on YouTube says, it's like the difference between a handshake agreement and a court order in regards to Randy's bond thing. I agree. All right, we're coming up on the break. We got one more segment dead ahead. Phone lines are open if you want to disagree with me or talk. I'm down to discuss it, but here's the problem. We're all going to have to feel the pain at some point because this cannot continue, and the edge of the fiscal cliff is rapidly approaching. I mean, it's been coming for a long time. I've been yelling about it. I've been warning about it. I've been like, the bridge is out. We're on the tracks and the bridge is out. You probably should stop throwing coal into the locomotive box. And instead of easing on the brakes, they've been shoveling the coal in the box. We got to go. Back with more. The Michael Duke Show.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now. Continuing on with our discussions here. Frank makes a good point. The legislature used to make a contract to pay a percentage of borough bonds. Remember that with school bonds and stuff like that? How does that work? How did that work out for bondholders? Because there was a time when the state just said, "Oh, sorry, can't pay that. Sorry, can't pay that." I mean, that's exactly it. We can't pay that. Yeah, I saw that, Harold. Gene Hackman and his wife, Gene Hackman, who is what, 89? 95. He and his wife were both found dead in their New Mexico home. They said that there's no signs of foul play, but when both of them end up, he said, check your CO detector. He could be right. The carbon monoxide is a silent killer. Maybe that's what happened. I don't know. 95, though. What a good run. Man, I love me some Gene Hackman. Let's see. I'm scrolling down here. What else do we got here? John asks, is there a way to get a constitutional addition via the state vote of the people? Yes, John. That's what Ben Carpenter tried to do last year with the enshrining the PFD. The problem is that you can't put a constitutional amendment on the ballot by a citizen's initiative. The legislature has to put that vote up to do it. So you've got to convince all the people who are in charge, the lunatics who are in charge of the asylum, you got to convince them to give the people a say in something on the Constitution. That's part of the problem. TR says, I think we need a good news day next week for our mental health, for your mental health and ours. Maybe we should just do a good news, maybe a whole hour of good news in that regard. Kevin says, trying to decide what to wear to work today. Could someone ask Harold what he wants me to wear for me? Because Harold was giving fashion advice yesterday when all those legislators appeared on the program. You know, he was talking about all their, oh man, he was given fashion advice for sure. C&J Alaska Adventures. How come I apologize, C&J. It says, how come border tax is never an idea? And I don't know what you're trying to say there. Your autocorrect is, how come better tax is never an idea and higher rate for non-resident business? What could you clarify that for me, please, C&J? And I'll come back to your question. Jeannie says Senator Jesse Bjorkman will be in Moose Pass on Friday, then Nikiski, and then on Soldata on Saturday. A techie nerd segment would be great, said Sourdough Steel. I used to do a tech segment, all in all. B&O tax. A B&O tax is never an idea. That's a good question. Probably, I don't know if I would be favor of business and operation as B&O. I don't know if I would be in favor of that because, again, I mean, we've already got a stressed private economy. Do you want to stress it even more by putting a B&O tax in? Yeah. Flex Pedro. I think you meant Felix Pedro. Is that what you're talking about? Felix Pedro? Frank, there you go. Felix Pedro. one of the first gold miners there in Fairbanks. Let's see. Everyone, including this older white guy, preach it, MD. I don't know what I was saying exactly when he said that, but there you go. Oh, man, we've already drove off the edge of the fiscal cliff. We're currently in free fall, attempting to remember how to operate our parachute properly, only to discover that we don't have any parachutes. We thought we packed them, but boy, howdy. Or those parachutes were made by the lowest bidder. One of the two. What of the two? How about a show on different ongoing community activities and groups people can participate in during the winter months to keep them from going stir crazy? That's true. That's true. Yeah. Terry says B&O tax is a big no. Washington State has one, and it's a nightmare. Yeah. I think adding new taxes is not the solution, in my opinion, quite honestly. And a tax on businesses, especially in light of what's going on in the private economy in the state right now, probably not a good idea. I mean, and I could say as a business owner, I would be philosophically opposed. Absolutely. All right, we got to get back into this here. The Michael Duke Show. Please like and share. 70-something of you in the chat rooms. Only 28 have liked it. You can hate it too. If you want to hate it, you can hate it. Hate it, like it, love it. Leave it. Don't leave it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That guy is so mean. I'm just, so mean. All right, welcome back to the program. Final segment for today's show. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. I'm working on some guests, but I don't have anything locked in right now. I'm working on it. I've got all day to get it finalized. So I hate to even say anything at this point because half the time I say something and then it never materializes. So we're just going to say I'm working on it. A final segment for today. Phone lines are open at 319-527-3864. So here, I guess, is, and everybody's giving, because somebody said we need a good news show next week to make up for all the madness that we, Terry said, I think we need a good news day next week for mental health purposes. And then Sourdough Steel said, a techie nerd segment would be great. I mean, I need to get back to Rod Pyle because we were going to do that space segment and then the time zone thing screwed us up and he thought it was at night and it was in the day and yada, yada, yada. So I'm going to try and get Rod Pyle back on the program. He is my space nerd. That guy is amazing. Worked for NASA, JPL. He was a consultant on the History Channel and a bunch of other shows. And he was a frequent guest of my show there for a couple of years. And I haven't talked to him in probably 2 or 3 years. We need to get him back on the program to talk about space. It should be fun. And yeah, maybe a tech nerdy segment. That would not be a bad idea. And then somebody else said, Richie said, how about a show on different ongoing community activities and groups people can participate in during the winter months to keep from going stir crazy? We do something. We'll do something. I mean, I know that everybody is tired of politics. Everybody's tired of politics at this point. I feel you, man. I feel you. It is frustrating to watch what's going on and to kind of be an observer and then not to really have any say. And that's been part of the problem with national politics for a long time. Is that you get so spun up about it, but we really cannot affect things that are happening at the national level. And that's why I have been advocating for years that this is why we need to pay close attention to what's going on in our local communities. What's happening in your city? Yeah, I mean, right down to maybe your road service area or your community council, your neighborhood, your city, your borough, and the state. That's about as high as you can go and really make any kind of, have a real effect is at the state level. So while it's important to pay attention to a lot of the things that are happening outside and at least be informed, Don't be so engaged and spun up by it that it wears you out. Wears you out. It's going to be interesting time when the politics drop off and things slow down, which, I mean, we can talk about some of this other stuff, but I agree with some of the listeners in here. We need to kind of change things up. We need to change things up occasionally. We'll do some lighter side stuff and things like that, but this is important. And I think it's important right now because, ironically, what's happening at the national level, this national conversation on what we should be doing, what the federal government should be spending its money on. And that's had a trickle down effect here in the state of Alaska, because now we're going to see that trickle down effect when, if we lose government employees, we lose federal employees, if we lose federal funding, we're going to get a real wake-up call on how ruggedly independent the state of Alaska really is. Here's a sneak peek. Not really. We are so dependent on the federal teat that we can't, we take so much money in from the federal government, and many of our programs are backstopped by all that federal lucre that we just can't, we'd like to think of ourselves, again, as rugged individualists. We like to think of ourselves, Alaska, the great land. We're the last of the pioneers. Yet at the same time, we are taking in money hand over fist from Uncle Sugar. And the second that it starts to dry up, all of a sudden the pucker factor gets high and people are like, whoa, wait a second. I'm all for limited government, but you're going to take away my sugar and my cheese? What am I going to do now? That's the thing. No more free cheese. Somebody just said, hey, Fatso, get to work. Stop crying. No more free cheese. I've been advocating for no more free cheese for a long time. I've been advocating for no more free cheese that's the thing. In the state of Alaska, it's unfortunate, but we have created a dependency state. In 69, when the state budget was $162 or $164 million, we did not have nearly the dependency that we have now. Again, if you adjusted that $164 million for inflation and population, it'd be about $2.2 billion in unrestricted general fund spending. But we're spending almost $6 billion. The state has become too big. It's trying to be all things to all people, just like the federal government has. And you can see state after state after state has done this same thing. They're seeing what the federal government's doing, and they're like, oh, we'd like to spend as much money as we can too. Look at California. What are they? They got a 50-something billion dollar deficit. And there's other states that are, and yet some states, the ones that seem to have people flocking to them, are understanding that they have to live within their means. They have to have a low tax threshold. They have to make it attractive for people to live. They can't have onerous regulations. And that's why people are flocking to places like Texas and Florida and some of these other places, because they're not these continuing problems that we have right now. So, where do we go from here? Well, we need to be telling our politicians who pays. That needs to be the question that is on everybody's lips. Who pays? And no, the PFD is not an answer, because the PFD is a short-term answer. See, because once they've consumed the PFD, government, the budgets are still going to increase. The budgets are still going to go up. And the PFD is kind of a finite amount of money. It has a percentage value in it, but it's not going up commensurate with the rate of spending. The increase in the rate of spending, the spending is outstripping it. So when you ask who pays and they say the PFD, you're like, okay, great. Well, then what happens 2 years from now? If you're paying it with the PFD this year and maybe next year, what happens in year 3 or year 4 when all of that is consumed and they still have a hole? Why aren't we lauding the efforts of people like Ben Carpenter, who was trying to bring us onto a sustainable fiscal track? Instead, we sandbag them. And then we besmirch them, and then we get them out of office. Remember, that was the big thing with Ben, was that, oh, he suggested a tax. The tax was part of an overarching plan. You understand that, right? And the tax was brought forward by the working group. He was just extrapolating everything out of the points that the working group made and said this would have to be part of something larger. But instead, they beat the hell out of him with it. And now what are they talking about? Oh, a new tax. And by the way, they've got these new taxes now that they're talking about, these brand new taxes that they're coming up, which would include the tax that we talked about with Rob Yunt, a new tax that would reduce the maximum oil credits from $8 to $5 a barrel, and another one that would impose a corporate income tax on some of the out-of-state businesses that operate online, an online business tax. You know what they're trying to do? They're trying to keep the taxes hidden from the average Alaskan so they don't get any pushback on the spending. That's the point. All the taxes as they're suggesting right now are not a broad-based in-your-face tax. They're quiet. They're behind the scenes. They're an oil tax. They're, the corporate tax, or this online tax for out-of-state businesses. They're making all those people pay, which, by the way, you still pay for because you buy the products. But for the most part, they're trying to keep these taxes hidden so that there's no pushback on spending. The bottom line is this. We have a spending problem. We've had a spending problem. And unless we address that, the doom loop is inevitable. The doom loop of more people moving out, leaving fewer people left to pick up the pieces, et cetera, that is inevitable unless we are able to get this spending under control and create a long-term fiscal plan, including a spending cap and everything else. Oh, I got a new call on hold. Caller, I'm 40 seconds away from the top of the hour. I'm going to put you on hold here. We're going to talk to you right off the air here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. We'll get a chance to talk about guns, firearms law, Second Amendment rights, and so much more. Be kind, love one another, live well. The Michael Duke Show continues then. Just think about that. Who pays? Who pays? We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Okay, we got one caller on hold, and so before we go to break, because they called in right at the end of the show, but I feel obligated to take that call. So let's go over here. Good morning.
410-9439. Thank
Hello?
you, and have a great day.
Okay. I don't know what's going on there. Let's see. I think somebody's spamming my caller. Okay. We got to go. That leaves us for the remainder of the day. You guys be kind. Love one another. Live well. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.